Hey Lancers, so congratulations on finishing your plan for your essay. Now it's time to take your plan and turn it into your multi-paragraph writing piece. If you filled out all parts of the plan, minus maybe the conclusion, then this should make it a lot easier to write your essay, and your essay should have everything in it that it needs to have, and it should be well organized. So remember, our essay is going to be 5 paragraphs long. The first paragraph will be the introduction, and then we'll have 3 body paragraphs, and then you'll conclude with the conclusion at the end. So the way that you write your essay from this is basically it's in order from beginning to end. So your introduction is composed of your lead, which sets the scene, introduces the topic. In this case, you're describing the climate. And then it's going to conclude or end with your thesis statement, which tells the reader more specifically what is the point you're trying to make in this piece of writing. So let's go ahead and get started. You have already filled in some details that you feel like help explain what the climate is like to your reader. So I have these 2 bullet points: that the land is tundra, which is cold, dry, long winters, short summers. And then I also have, in some parts, it may be freezing for all but a few weeks of the year. To start my essay, I just have to take these bullet points and I have to put them into complete sentences. So I'll show you with mine what the beginning of my essay looks like. So I start with an introduction sentence just because I want to let them know that I'm talking about Northern Canada here. And then I go into my climate piece. So here's my start. Northern Canada is made up of 3 territories: Nunavut, Yukon, and Northwest Territories. Because most of the land is tundra, it is cold and dry with long winters and short summers. In some parts, it may be freezing for all but a few weeks of the year. So there I've introduced my topic. Now, a quick reminder as you're doing your introduction that these words, Northern Canada and climate, must go in your introduction. You may also put in population, transportation, food, but these ones have to be in there. So at some point in your intro, let your reader know that you're talking about Northern Canada. So what I'm going to ask you to do now is pause the video. I want you to look at your notes that you took about climate, and I want you to go ahead and start your essay by typing those notes, your lead, up into complete sentences. And when you're done, you can resume and we'll talk about the thesis statement. Okay, so I didn't write a thesis statement, but hopefully you have a thesis statement written here. This can be a challenging part for people, so if you're struggling, feel free to ask for help. But your thesis statement is going to follow your lead. So you're going to do your introduction, your lead here, and then right after that in the same paragraph comes your thesis statement. Okay? When you're done, check to make sure that you have mentioned climate and you have also mentioned Northern Canada. And then possibly, maybe as part of your thesis statement, you might or might not have these 3 topics introduced as well. So I want you to pause the video and I want you to take your thesis statement and I want you to add it to the last sentence of your introduction. Go ahead and pause the video and do that. And when you're done, come back and we'll talk about how to write your first body paragraph. Okay, next up is to introduce your first topic, which is talking about population, more specifically how climate affects the population in Northern Canada. So this is a new paragraph. Your first sentence should be the topic sentence of your paragraph, and you need to use a transition word and introduce the next topic, which is population. So to help you out, on the back of your plan, we have some transition sets. To introduce the first of your topics, you can use any of these first transition words. To introduce a second, third, fourth, last transition set, you could use these ones in the middle. And these ones on the end would only work for your final paragraph that you're introducing. Okay, so think about which transitions you might want to use. The most simple, if this is new for you and you're just getting into it, would to be say something like the first example, another example, the last example. So the first example is population, another example is transportation, the last example is food, or the first way, the second way, another way. But I also, if you're ready to further your writing, I encourage you to try and mix up your transitions. So it's a little more interesting than one example, another example, a final example. And I will talk about some ways that you can do that here in a second. Okay? All right, so maybe pick a transition word and you want to use it to write a sentence that introduces the topic of population. So I'll show you what that looks like on mine. Okay, so the transition that I chose was one way, and I want to introduce population. So mine looks like this. One way the cold affects northern Canada is the population. I could say one way the climate affects northern Canada is the population. And there I have introduced my new topic, and from there I'm going to be able to write my details. So go ahead, pause the video, and think about how you can introduce your first idea, your first star idea, using the transition sets on the back. Okay, once you have introduced that, then what you need to do is look at all the details that you included about population, and you need to put them together into sentences that help you explain how climate affects the population. Don't forget to try to connect climate to population. Don't just talk about how there aren't very many people. Make sure you connect that to climate if you can. Okay. So these here, you're going to go back to your writing piece, and in the same paragraph from here, you're going to type out all the details you have about population in complete sentences in a way that makes sense. One thing to note is if I were you, I would have my research notes next to me while I'm doing this in case you want to clarify anything or add anything to it. So go ahead and use your plan and your notebook to write that paragraph about population. And when you're done, come back and we'll talk about one last thing, and then you'll be able to finish your plan. Okay, so last little tip. I'm going to talk about transitions a little bit, and then you're going to go ahead and complete your writing piece using your plan here. But I want to talk about introducing your second star idea and show you how you can vary, meaning mix up those transition words, and you can bury some of them. So varying and burying transitions just makes your writing seem a little less like a formula and a little more natural. So I started with one way the cold affects people there as the population. I'm going to not do another way. I think I'm going to use the transition word also for this one. And instead of leading with my transition word, one way, or also at the beginning, I'm going to bury it in my sentence. So I'll show you what that would look like. Okay, so here's my new topic I'm introducing. Here's my transition word. Transportation is also affected by the climate. So I varied my transition. I did different ones, and this one I buried in my sentence, either in the middle or in the end. Okay, and then what I'm going to do from there is I'm going to work my way through my transportation details. And then after I'm done with that, I'll introduce my final topic, and I'll write my paragraph about with those details, and then I'll be ready to move on to the conclusion. So if varying and burying your transitions is just a little more than your head can handle for right now, that's okay. You can go with one way, another way, a final way, or one example, another example, a final example at the beginning of your sentence, if that helps you get into it, as long as you include those transition words. So go ahead and finish writing your essay from your plan. And when you're done, you can watch the final video, which will help you write the dreaded conclusion. At least for me anyway, the conclusion is dreaded. That can be a really challenging part, but you will have a video in the writing tutorials to help you write that conclusion. All right, good luck, and let me know if you have any questions.